If you're a medical professional in your 20s watching this video and you actually do everything I'm about to say, it will net you multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not $1 million or more in the future. I'm a critical care PA and I became a millionaire at 31. Not because of what I did when I was 30 or 31, but because of what I did in my 20s. Leveraging your 20s to build wealth is probably the most underrated money tool there is. I'm going to give you a checklist of the things you need to do in your 20s to set yourself up for having the flexibility to have the lifestyle that you want, reduce your hours, retire early, etc. when you're in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. Let's dive in to the list of money by decade things to do in your 20s. The first is to increase your income. Now, in this season, you're probably a brand new medical professional. And for that reason, you may feel like you don't have the negotiating power or the ability to earn more. This is a misnomer. Even as a brand new grad, the easiest thing you can do to negotiate your offer is to interview excessively and get multiple offers. Then you can compare them to each other and bring that to the table when you don't have the ability to bring to the table all of your years of experience and your skill set, etc. Regardless of if you're brand new or you've been in the game a few years, you need to negotiate your income. Not only do you need to negotiate, you need to do this from the lens of a mutually beneficial win-win business relationship. Remembering that at the end of the day, medicine is a business, and if there are no profits, they can't pay you more, right? So when you go to position your negotiation or your offer, you need to position it in a way that allows a win-win situation where you're very clearly delineating how you're meeting your employer's goals, you're increasing revenue for them or increasing their margins, and then thus you can be more compensated on the back end of that. So I have a whole negotiation system I teach. I don't have time to go through it all right here, but the key is viewing it from that lens and having a plan for a no. If the answer is a no, you sit with your employer and create a list of objective metrics that meet their goals that you can achieve over the next 6 to 12 months, and then agree on a follow-up meeting. If you achieve the metrics, would you think it would be reasonable for me to receive XYZ raise? The answer often is yes. Now, don't forget, even outside of your primary job, there's a lot of stuff that you can do as a medical professional to increase your income. A lot. I put an asterisk here on this list of things next to the things I've personally done. Honestly, I've been a hustler really in the almost 10 years I've been a PA, doing all sorts of side hustles to increase my income throughout those years. Some pay more than others, some take less time than others, but they all are variations on the theme of how do I earn more money? You can do expert witness work. This one's a little tricky because this one may require some years of experience. And so if you're brand new, you might not be eligible yet. You can work per diem shifts, of course. Anybody can work per diem shifts anytime. That's the very first thing I did as a brand new grad to get started. And I specifically worked per diem shifts in the field I was already working in. So I didn't have to try to learn a new field of medicine. I was a hospitalist PA and I picked up hospitalist per diem work so that it was the same thing. You can be a speaker for a pharmaceutical company or device. Honestly, this is a great side hustle, but again, they typically like a couple of years of experience, so you might have to hold off at the very beginning. You can do aesthetics, travel medicine, you can tutor undergrads, graduate students, people taking their boards. You can host CME conferences or even online courses, which is becoming more and more common. You can do telehealth. You can be a paid consultant to a pharmaceutical company. For example, a recent pharmacist that I know got paid to create some patient education documents for a pharmaceutical company surrounding a specific disease state. You can use locum positions. You can take affiliate or adjunct faculty positions. Of course, there's always investment real estate. You can go buy a mobile home park. You can own a practice. There's the list of things you can do to increase your income is literally limitless. The only limit is what you can think of. And remember that in this season of life, you're often time rich, money poor. Now, I say that twofold because one, you're time rich in terms of years for your money and skills to compound, but you often are also time rich in terms of maybe you don't have the 4 kids yet that you're going to have. And so you have a little bit more free time in the evenings than you will a decade from now. So this is the time for you to really hustle, find ways to increase your income. And the cool thing about utilizing those side hustles is that those are also building your CV. Like if you go get a job as a speaker, if you go get an adjunct faculty position, when you go to negotiate your next primary job, you look like a much more compelling candidate than someone who doesn't have those same things on their CV. So it's a win-win. It's professional development as well. This is a great example of why income matters really early on. If you make $110K a year, you never get a raise, and you diligently invest 20% of your income, you end up doing okay. But if in the first 3 years, you increase your income to $150K, very possible, and then you never get a raise again, that alone nets you an extra $1,000,000. So having an early income that's high is actually a really big deal and something you should be very focused on in your 20s. It's not enough just to get that job, right? It's how do you get the job that's going to professionally develop you, pay you the most, and utilize some of these side hustles to build not only your personal wealth, but your professional CV. Next, how do you maximize experiences without expenses? You're in a season where like going out and doing the fun stuff can and should be something that you're doing. However, there's a big difference between saying, I'm going to go spend 3 weeks in Europe, backpacking and exploring, and I'm going to go spend 3 weeks in Europe, and I'm going to fly first class, and I'm going to stay at 4 and 5-star hotels, and I'm going to spend $15,000, right? You can find ways to create experiences without blowing tons of money on it. These are a couple examples of the types of events we've actually hosted inside our Millionaires in Medicine Club so that you can see how we're helping people do this. For example, Daniel talks about credit card point hacking. Disclaimer, I'll never carry credit card debt. Always use credit card points, okay? And so like talking about credit card point hacking, and Julia did a whole segment for us talking about travel hacking, but things like this can be little ways where you can utilize cash back, travel points, etc., to get the experience and enjoy the heck out of your 20s without blowing the bank and then moving into the next decade with nothing to show for all your hard work. This might be one of the most important pieces. You need to invest in the stock market. Now, the key is you just need to invest. Like you can invest in anything that's income producing, right? Like your primary residence doesn't count. A car doesn't count, okay? But you can invest in any income producing asset and achieve the same outcome. So why do I say invest in the stock market? It has the lowest barrier to entry, right? If you want to go buy a short-term rental and you found this vacation market in a beautiful home, you probably need $100,000, right? For the down payment, for the staging, etc. If you wanted to go do a private equity syndication and be a part of a 500 unit apartment complex, you can go do that, but you probably need to be an accredited investor and you probably need $100K. Investing in the stock market has like no barrier to entry anymore. This is the beauty of living in the time that we do now compared to previous times in history. But you can open up an account at any major custodian, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, Fidelity, etc. You can invest in an ETF with no minimum investment, no account fees, and you can literally start with $20, which is why this is the first game you should play, because the barrier to entry is nothing. There's no excuse. Why does it matter that you do it early? The number that you hit at the end of that 20s decade in your investment portfolio determines so much about what the next 40 years holds for you financially, okay? The bigger the numbers you hit early on, because of the beauty of compound earnings and time, the easier your life is on the back end. That's just the way it is. We're all at a disadvantage because we spend a lot of our 20s in training, right? However, you probably still have a few years on the back end, depending on the timeline of graduation, and you can play a little bit of catch up. If you can hit $100,000 invested by the end of your 20s, you're looking at a future of 1.5 million-ish without you doing any additional investing. If you can hit 200,000 by the end of your 20s, that ups to 3 million. And if you can hit 300,000 by the end of your 20s, that ups to 4.4 million. Now, the reason that you should shoot for that 300,000 at the end of your 20s is because it buys you freedom and flexibility. Most medical professionals, it varies, of course, by your income, your expenses, but a lot of single medical professionals need somewhere between 3 and 5 million for a standard inflation-adjusted retirement. So you can see this gets you that almost by itself. And so that gives you a ton of options on the back end. You could reduce hours. You could officially hit what's called coast fire, where you could stop investing and live on less, just keep working enough to cover expenses. The world is your oyster, right? You get to choose. And that's the benefit of starting early. If you miss your 20s and you're into your 30s, the numbers are not as powerful. It's just the nature of the beast. I'm not saying it's fair, but that's just how the money works. This is a great example of what happens based on the age you started investing $2,000 a month. Now, this is actually very achievable and probably should be done by every medical professional, the $2,000 a month, right? Because if you think about, if you earn $100,000 a year, $2,000 a month invested translates to $24,000 invested throughout the year. So that's a 24% savings rate, right? And most medical professionals should have a 20% savings rate. So it's pretty spot on. You can see if you start that at 25, it lands you at 6.7. If you just wait till 30, you lose over 2 million bucks that way. You lose 2 million bucks just by waiting till 30. Okay, so that's how valuable the back half of those 20s are and how seriously you should take your wealth building potential. I would not be where I am right now financially if the back half of my 20s didn't look like it did. That's what did it for me. More than anything else, more than anything I've done in my 30s to date, right? It was those last few years of my 20s that started the snowball. That's what you need to be focusing on, is how can you build a foundation, build that snowball that's going to continue to roll down the hill and earn you more and more money. You need to stabilize your cash reserves in this season. You need genuine cash. You need liquid, accessible cash because life happens and it's expensive. This doesn't mean, oh, I need access to a line of credit. No, like you need cash. Now, if you're smart, you'll drop it in a high yield savings account and earn some money on it. But you need something available to you for things that happen because they invariably will. For most medical professionals, the goal here is 3 months of expenses. So if you spend $4,000 a month, you need $12,000 in a high yield savings. Get it there. Stabilize yourself financially so that when you move into some of the bigger purchases that you might want to make, house, car, etc., you're not doing it strapped for cash. Very important next step, develop a debt strategy. Notice I did not say become debt-free. Okay, this is a perfect example of when debt strategy needs to be get debt-free. Credit card debt, right? In this example, the interest rate's 23%. And actually, that's far below the current average. But you can see you pay an astronomical amount of interest on credit card debt. It takes an astronomical amount of time to pay it off if you pay the minimum payment. This is a recipe for financial disaster. This is you keeping yourself in financial shackles, and this has to go. So if credit card debt is the question, the answer is become debt-free, right? Because high interest debt will do nothing other than prevent you from making any type of financial progress. If student loan debt is the game we're playing, then the name of the game isn't always become debt-free. It's what's your student loan strategy. Now, there are a million things you can do with student loan debt, right? There's public service loan forgiveness. There's taxable loan forgiveness. There's state forgiveness programs. This is an example of just comparing a standard 10-year payoff plan versus an accelerated 10-year payoff plan. You can see the person at the top pays her loans off in 4 years. Person at the bottom pays it off in 10. The person on the top, they start investing aggressively after 4 years. The person on the bottom, they just invest the whole way, but a little bit less per month, right? In the end, you can see the top person saves some money in interest, undoubtedly. They save like 25 grand, but they come out like $200,000 behind in assets. So they net lose the game. This is just, again, the example between standard and accelerated. You want to play the game between public service loan forgiveness and accelerated? We can talk all day. the key is you need a strategy here. The student loan strategy isn't always become debt-free, right? Most people who crush it with money early on as a medical professional understand the importance of student loan strategy in the big picture plan. Number 5, let your lifestyle lag. I don't mean Starbucks and avocado toast, okay? That stuff doesn't really matter. What I mean is your overhead, your house and your car. More than anything else, these decisions will wreck you. If your housing is more than 20% of your gross, if your car payment is more than 8% of your take-home pay, you're in trouble. You can't afford it because you also probably have somewhere between 5 and 10% of your income going to student loan debt. So don't forget, for you, it's more than just I have to have enough money for my overhead and investing. It's also I have to have money for my student loans. And oh, by the way, groceries are $1 million, right? So you need to make these decisions wisely, whether it's renting or purchasing. If you make these decisions wrong in your 20s, man, is it hard to play catch up in your 30s. And nobody likes to have to sell the house and downgrade because 5 years later they realize, shoot, I'm never going to be able to retire if I stay in the house I bought. The last is invest in skills. More than anything else, your skills compound just like your money does. Now, of course, this can be clinical skills, like that's very important and it will earn you more money. But for me, the life change has not come from that. It's actually come from investing in skills outside of that. Things like investing, real estate, tax strategy, estate planning, business building, etc. The whole time since I have been a clinician, I have very consistently been taking myself and figuring out what skills do I need to level up, going out and acquiring them. That means for me, I take a bunch of courses, I read a bunch of books, I do a bunch of podcasts, I paid for a bunch of coaches. You can do this in a way where it's kind of dumb, where you just blow money and you don't get anything from it. But if you do it in an intentional way, you can use this to life hack your way to basically other people's experience. Like, for example, I'll go through a coaching program on real estate investing, and then I'll give myself a year to actually implement, execute, get the result. Then I'll go pay for the next coaching program on XYZ, and then I'll implement and get the result. Then I'll go do the next program on this. And so I do it in a way where it's a stair-step approach, but it allows me to get ROI or return on investment because I actually take someone else's 10 years of experience, condense it down into 60, 90, 120 days, learn it for myself, implement it, execute it for myself, and then keep skill stacking. The same way you learn medicine, you can learn almost anything else. And so if you're willing to learn some of these things, especially how to actually make money, earn money, right? It makes more of a difference, to be honest, than even learning more medicine does. If you do these things in your 20s, it will completely change your 30s, completely change your 40s. Tell you from experience, right? I tell you this from personal experience. The key to unlocking the most freedom and flexibility you can imagine is nailing this. If you're willing to do it, you'll be ahead of 99% of folks.